Welcome back. Today we're looking at a video transcript that dives right into a pretty intense political topic, the rise of anti-Semitism in some conservative circles, and how President Trump has tried to distance himself from people like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens.
And what hits you right away is the passion. The writer has done the homework, pulling together a lot of specific, factual examples. You can feel the conviction behind it.
You really can. But that conviction, that passion, is sort of the core of our first point. It seems like the highly charged, intensely personalized tone often overshadows the gravity of the factual evidence being presented.
It does. I mean, the script leans heavily on these really judgmental labels. You see things like woke right, candy bloody Owens, dingbats.
Right.
And the host keeps saying things like, no doubt about it in my mind, one bit. And while that really communicates their personal outrage, it also comes with a pretty big risk.
Which is that it starts to sound less like an analysis and more like a partisan broadcast?
Exactly. More like a rant. And if your goal is to persuade anyone who isn't already completely on your side, using those kinds of personal names, it can just, turn them off immediately. It hurts your credibility.
Okay, but I have to push back a little. If you take all of that out, if you go for this totally sterile journalistic voice, don't you lose the moral urgency that's driving the whole piece? Where's the line?
That's the key question. And I think the balance is in letting the facts do the condemning for you. The facts here are so strong, they don't need the extra layer of outrage to be effective. So the suggestion is to adopt a more objective, journalistic voice when you're relaying the core information. You anchor the argument in what's verifiable and the specific actions these people took. That way, your authority is much, much stronger.
So the moral conviction comes from the choice of evidence, not the adjectives you use.
You got it. It's a shift from personal insult to documented fact. And that gives the whole thing so much more power.
So how would that actually look in the script? Can you give me a concrete example?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take the language around Candace Owens. Instead of calling her Candy Bloody Owens, which is, purely subjective.
Right.
You just state the sourced fact. Something like Candace Owens, who was named Anti-Semite of the Year in December by the watchdog group Stop Anti-Semitism.
That's way more powerful because it's not just the host's opinion anymore. It's a designation from a third-party organization.
Exactly. It carries so much more weight. And you can do the same thing with someone like Tucker Carlson. Instead of a general label, you focus on the specific action. You talk about the fact that his interview with Fuentes led to a wave of resignations at the Heritage Foundation.
Ah, so you focus on the institutional backlash.
Yes. The resignations, that's the tangible proof of a political crisis. It's showing, not just telling. You're letting the audience connect the dots themselves.
I see. And speaking of connecting the dots, that actually brings up the next big issue, which is how all these details are presented. It's a lot.
It is, which leads right into the structural problem. I think our next point is that the overall flow struggles due to the rapid-fire incorporation of disparate details controversies without clear structural signposts or transitions.
Yeah, it really jumps around. You go from a big, broad statement like some people are vehemently against the Jews, and then bam, you're suddenly in the weeds of this very specific insider drama at the Heritage Foundation.
With Kevin Roberts defending Tucker Carlson and staff getting upset, or that tiny detail about J.D. Vance inviting Carlson to the White House, not Trump.
And those details are great, they're valuable, but they feel like they're just dropped in out of nowhere. It breaks up the main story about Trump and his public statements.
It's too much, too fast, without a roadmap for the audience. So the suggestion here is to create distinct, focused sections where these specific stories serve a single, clear purpose. It's about organizing the evidence into themes, not just listing it chronologically.
Okay, so like grouping things together, what would that look like in practice?
Well, you could go with, say, a thematic approach. You could have a whole section called something like the institutional fallout. And that's where you put all the evidence about the real-world consequences, the ADL getting involved, the Heritage Foundation resignations.
So you establish the stakes first. You show why this matters before you dive into who said what.
Exactly. And the other option is to just be clearer with your transitions. We could call it transitional clarity. So when the host goes from one of Trump's quotes, like, "You're not welcome in MAGA," to talking about the Mar-a-Lago dinner, you need a bridge.
A signpost.
A signpost, yeah. Don't just jump. You could say something like, and we see this public stance playing out in his efforts to distance himself from specific events. The most notable example, of course, was the fallout from that 2022 dinner with Nick Fuentes. You see?
Yeah, that little sentence connects everything back to the main argument. It tells the listener why you're about to tell them this story.
It's a cognitive anchor. It makes the narrative feel cohesive, like you're building a case, not just throwing facts at the wall.
Okay, so we've got tone, we've got structure, but the piece kind of goes off the rails for me right at the very end.
I completely agree. The conclusion, it's a major pivot, which is our final point. The material loses focus in its final moment by shifting abruptly from a sharp political analysis of the MAGA movement to a personal theological justification for siding with Israel.
It's such a jarring shift, isn't it? The whole time you're deep in political strategy, quotes, resignation, all this evidence-based stuff. And then the last thought is suddenly, I read my Bible, I know my history, and that's why I'll always stand.
It's the weakness for sure. You're introducing a totally new lens, personal faith, that hasn't been part of the conversation at all. It feels unsupported and, frankly, a bit confusing. It's not the conclusion to the argument you just spent 10 minutes building.
Right. The conclusion should be about the political piece.
It has to be. So the suggestion is to reframe the conclusion to synthesize the political implications of the evidence you just laid out. The final message needs to reinforce that central theme of political realignment within the party.
So how do you do that? How do you take that same sentiment but make it political?
You redirect it. You make the final takeaway about the consequences of Trump's actions, not about personal belief.
Okay, so give me an example. What would that sound?
You could end with something like, so the real takeaway here is the political dilemma that's being created. When Trump makes these public condemnations, it creates a formal public rift. And that rift forces a very visible realignment of who can credibly claim to be MAGA, making this whole issue a central battleground for the party's future.
That's so much stronger. It brings it all back to political strategy and what it means for the election. It answers the so what question for the audience.
Exactly. And you can still address that point about defending Israel, you just do it within a political frame.
How so?
Instead of a personal defense, you analyze the kind of language these figures are using. You point out that someone like Fuentes isn't offering a nuanced critique of Israeli policy.
No, he's talking about the influence of organized Jewry.
Right. And you frame it that way. You show that their rhetoric isn't a policy debate. It's classic anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. By analyzing their language, you strengthen your political argument instead of pivoting away from it.
That's a really smart way to handle it. The whole piece becomes one cohesive political argument from start to finish.
And that's what will make it so powerful. You're letting the political evidence and the consequences speak for themselves.
This has been incredibly helpful. So just to quickly recap for the listener. The three main opportunities.
First, it's about the tone and style. The advice is to pull back on the personalized insults and let the well-researched facts carry the weight of the argument. It builds more authority.
Right. Second, the structure and flow. Grouping the evidence into themes and using clearer signposts will help the audience follow all the complex details without getting lost.
And finally, that focus and purpose in the conclusion. Make sure the ending synthesizes the political analysis you've presented rather than shifting to a personal or theological justification.
It seems like these changes will really let the powerful evidence the writer has gathered shine through. It's great material.
It really is. And we are genuinely excited to see how you refine this. Please take these ideas, work with them, and send the piece back to us. We'd love to take another look.
Keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you soon.